The observation deck. The crystalline spire of the Galactic Council stood like a frozen lightning bolt against the purple nebula that birthed civilizations. Inside its highest chamber, Ambassador Thalen Rourke straightened his formal jacket, the fabric enhanced with nanothreads that shimmered under alien light. He was the first human to ever stand in this room, and 200 species were about to decide if his people would remain the last. Beside him, his cultural advisor Mira Castellan whispered urgently. The Vrexian delegation just signaled. They're voting against us. Thalen didn't flinch. He'd expected this. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy like an explosion, 50 years of expansion that made elder species nervous. Fast ships. Aggressive trade. Cultural contamination they called it. Above the council floor, in the observation galleries that ringed the chamber like the orbits of electrons, thousands of beings watched. Some had traveled light years to witness this moment. The admission of Earth to the Galactic Council, or its rejection and isolation for another century. In Gallery 7, a Kelthran merchant named Zixval adjusted his ocular array. His species had 8 eyes arranged in a crown around his skull, perfect for reading the micro-expressions of negotiation. He'd bet 30,000 credits on humanity's rejection. Easy money. Beginning now, announced Prime Arbiter Souls through Song, a being of pure energy contained in a magnetic bottle. Her voice resonated through every translator in the chamber. The 741st vote of admission. Species, human. Homeworld, Earth. Sponsor, the Remnant Coalition. That last part made whispers ripple through the galleries. The Remnant Coalition consisted of the oldest species in the galaxy, those who remembered the before times. Why would they sponsor these aggressive newcomers? Thalen stepped to the podium, his shoes clicking on floors that predated his entire civilization. He looked up at the galleries, at the countless eyes and sensors and perception organs all focused on him. Esteemed beings of the Council, he began, his voice steady. We know what you fear. We expanded too fast. Colonized too aggressively. Our music is too loud, our ships too bright, our laughter too frequent in the solemn places of the cosmos. In Gallery 7, Zixval's trading partner, a silicate named Chromatic Reflection, made a grinding sound of approval. At least the human admits their faults. We have been called reckless, Thalen continued. Dangerous. A species that makes contact with everyone and asks permission from no one. You see our 100 worlds and think we seek 1,000 more. You hear our offers of trade and suspect conquest. You watch us adapt to every environment and wonder what we're really adapting for. The chamber was silent now. Even Souls Through Song's constant hum had quieted. You're right to be cautious, Thalen said, and Myra's hand tightened on her datapad. This wasn't the speech they'd rehearsed. Because you've seen species like us before. Fast-growing, quick to fight, slow to listen. You've watched them burn bright and collapse. You've erected quarantine zones around their dying worlds. You've mourned the potential they wasted. In the galleries, the Vrexian observers clicked their mandibles in satisfaction. The human was confessing. The vote would be unanimous. But Thalen smiled. What you haven't seen, he said quietly, is what happens when a species like us is given a chance instead of a quarantine. You haven't seen what we become when welcomed rather than isolated. You've never asked yourselves, what if one of those reckless, dangerous species was given guidance instead of rejection? He paused, letting the translation systems catch up. The Remnant Coalition remembers the before times. They remember the architects who built this very spire. They remember that the architects were once considered too dangerous, too chaotic, too young. But the galaxy gave them a chance. One chance. And they became the greatest civilization you'd ever known. Souls Through Song pulsed bright orange, a sign of emotional response. We're not asking you to trust us, Thalen said. We're asking you to give us the same chance you gave the architects. Let us prove what humanity can become when we're part of something greater than ourselves. Vote yes and watch us change. Vote no and we'll expand anyway, alone and afraid, becoming exactly what you fear. He stepped back from the podium. The silence stretched like the space between stars. Then Souls Through Song spoke. The council will now vote. In Gallery 7, Zixval recalculated his bet. Suddenly, those 30,000 credits felt very much at risk. The first light. The voting chamber transformed. 217 holographic spheres materialized above the council floor, each representing a voting member species. They floated in a perfect geodesic pattern, an ancient design meant to ensure no species held geometric advantage over another. Thalen watched from his position, Mira beside him. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his face remained calm. 50 years of diplomatic training screamed that showing fear now would influence undecided votes. The Vrection Collective announced souls through song. A sphere pulsed red. Rejection. Expected. The Vrections controlled 300 mineral-rich worlds and saw human mining efficiency as an existential threat to their economy. Thalen had spent 6 months trying to negotiate with them, offering technology exchanges, trade agreements, joint ventures. They'd smiled with their mandibles and voted their interests. The Keltheran Trade Federation. Another red pulse. In Gallery 7, Zixval's 8 eyes glittered with satisfaction. His own government had voted as he'd predicted. The 30,000 credits were looking safer. But beside him, chromatic reflection made that grinding sound again. Interesting. The Luminary Accord is next. They usually follow Keltheran leads. The Luminary Accord. The sphere pulsed blue. Acceptance. Zixval's eyes narrowed. The luminaries were light-based beings who rarely broke from traditional voting blocks. What had changed their assessment? On the council floor, a luminary representative named Dawn Phase Ascending spoke, their voice like harmonized crystal. We vote acceptance because humans have shown us something we had forgotten. 3 cycles ago, a human merchant vessel encountered one of our sea ships in distress near the Korvax Rift. They stopped. Help. Asked for nothing in return. When we asked why, the human captain said, because that's what decent beings do. We had forgotten that simplicity exists. Thalen felt Myra's hand brush his, a brief touch of solidarity. 1 vote for. 2 against. 214 to go. The voting continued in the traditional order, oldest species first. The pattern seemed to confirm Zixval's prediction. More red than blue. The Crystalline Confederacy, the Nebula Shepherds, the Void Walkers, all voted rejection. Then came the Remnant Coalition members, those ancient species who'd sponsored humanity's application. The First Memory Collective. Blah. The Dawn Architects. Blah. The Eternal Watchers. Blah. The chamber filled with confused murmurs. The remnant species rarely voted as a bloc. Their age and power meant they usually abstained or split their votes to maintain balance. But here they were, all 12 of them voting acceptance. The oldest being in the chamber, a representative of the First Memory Collective named Archive of Yesterday, spoke in a voice like wind through ruins. We vote acceptance because we remember what the galaxy loses when it fears potential instead of nurturing it. We remember the species we rejected who would have been great. We remember the architects who we almost rejected. We will not make that mistake again. The voting accelerated. Species after species, their spheres pulsing red or blue. The count remained close, too close. Thalen's training kept his expression neutral, but inside, his mind raced through contingencies. If they lost, Earth would face another century of isolation, maybe longer. The aggressive expansion that had worried the Council would intensify, his people spreading without guidance, without wisdom, becoming exactly what the galaxy feared. In Gallery 7, Zixval recalculated constantly. The vote was closer than any admission vote in 300 years. His trading algorithms couldn't find a clear pattern. Some species voted economic interests, others cultural compatibility, still others seemed influenced by random human encounters. A methane breather named Pressure Adapted spoke. I vote acceptance because a human child once gave my offspring a drawing. A simple picture of 2 beings holding tentacles under a yellow star. My offspring keeps it in their hibernation chamber. They say it reminds them the galaxy can be kind. Blah. The Silicate Consciousness voted. Rejection. Humans are too chemically reactive. Their emotions leak into everything. Red. The Pattern Weavers voted. Acceptance. Human music has frequencies we've never encountered. It's chaotic but beautiful. We wish to learn their chaos. Blah. Mira kept count on her datapad, her fingers flying. She leaned to Thalen. It's going to come down to the sovereign domains. They vote last and they're currently split 50-50 on every projection model. The sovereign domains were the middle-aged civilizations, species who joined the Council between 1 and 3,000 years ago. Large enough to matter, recent enough to remember their own admissions. They'd be swayed by practical concerns, not ancient wisdom or random kindness. The voting continued. Red, blue, red, red, blue. The count climbed toward the 2/3 threshold needed for admission. 145 required for acceptance. The numbers crawled. 120, 130, 138. Then came the sovereign domains. The first 10 split evenly. 5 red, 5 blue. Souls Through Song's energy field flickered with anticipation. Even the prime arbiter seemed invested in the outcome. The count reached 143. 2 votes short. 3 sovereign species remained. In Gallery 7, Zixval's 8 eyes locked on the final 3 spheres. His bet, his reputation, his entire trading strategy depended on predicting these votes. He'd studied them for weeks, built models, bribed informants. 2 would vote red, 1 blue. Humanity would fall short. But chromatic reflection leaned closer, their crystalline body humming. "You're about to lose a lot of credits, my friend." "Impossible," Zixval said. "The mathematics are clear." "Mathematics don't account for hope," the silicate replied. The second-to-last sphere floated alone in the sudden silence. And the future of humanity hung waiting in the space between possibility and reality. The sovereign choice. The penultimate sphere belonged to the quorum of tides, a species of liquid-state beings whose civilization flowed across 17 ocean worlds. Their representative, current that connects, materialized as a column of sentient water held in a force field cylinder. Thalen had met with them twice during the campaign. They'd been polite but non-committal, their fluid nature making them difficult to read. They cared primarily about ecological stability and viewed humanity's terraforming efforts with suspicion. "The quorum of tides," announced Souls Through Song. The sphere remained neutral, neither red nor blue, hanging in that uncertain state for longer than any previous vote. In the galleries, thousands of beings leaned forward, straining against their various means of perception. Current that connects spoke, their voice like waves on a shore. "We have deliberated extensively on this matter. Humans alter environments with shocking speed. They reshape worlds to suit their needs rather than adapting to what exists. This troubles us deeply." Zixval allowed himself a small gesture of triumph with his anterior manipulators. "Red vote incoming." The mathematics held. However, the water being continued, 6 lunar cycles ago, human ecologists contacted us. They had discovered our concerns through their intelligence networks and wished to address them directly. They shared their terraforming protocols, admitted their mistakes, and asked for our guidance on 17 of their colony worlds. The chamber stirred. Sharing technological protocols wasn't standard diplomatic procedure, especially during an admission campaign when every action was scrutinized. They implemented our suggestions completely. Revised their entire colonial policy based on our ecological models. When we asked why they would accept such limitations, they said, "Because we want to do better and you know how." Current that connects pulsed with bioluminescence. "We vote acceptance. Not because humans are perfect but because they demonstrated something rare, the willingness to change based on wisdom beyond their own." Well, 144 votes for admission. 1 short of the threshold. Myra's hand found Thalen's again, this time gripping hard enough to hurt. His face remained impassive, but inside, every cell in his body screamed with tension. 1 vote. 50 years of expansion, 300 billion human lives, the trajectory of an entire species, all balanced on 1 final vote. The last sphere belonged to the Concordat of Minds, a hive-intelligent species that thought in parallel across billions of nodes. Their representative was designated Unity of Purpose, a single body that spoke for trillions. Thalen had never successfully negotiated with them. Their thought processes were too distributed, too nonlinear. Every conversation felt like speaking into a vast ocean and hoping for a coherent echo. He'd left those meetings with no sense of whether he'd succeeded or failed. "The Concordat of Minds," Souls Through Song announced, and her energy field blazed bright enough to cast shadows in every gallery. The sphere hung motionless. Unity of Purpose stood, their body a composite of smaller organisms working in perfect synchronization. When they spoke, millions of voices harmonized into one. "We have processed this decision through 7 billion individual perspectives across our network." The computational load was substantial. Humans are a paradox. Individually unpredictable, collectively chaotic, yet capable of moments of stunning coordination. You are many beings pretending to be one species, while we are one being pretending to be many. Thalen had no idea if that was positive or negative. Beside him, Mira had stopped breathing. "We find this fascinating," Unity of Purpose continued. "But fascination is not sufficient reason for admission. We required more data. So we sent our observation nodes to 117 human worlds. We watched you in secret for 3 years. We saw your wars and your peaces, your cruelties and your kindnesses, your selfishness and your sacrifices." In Gallery 7, even Zixval had stopped calculating. This was unprecedented. The Concordat had never admitted to covert observation before. On 73 occasions, we observed humans helping strangers at personal cost. On 41 occasions, we watched humans choose long-term communal benefit over short-term individual gain. On 92 occasions we saw humans laugh in the face of certain death. This last behavior confused us most. A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Even some of the rejected voters clicked or hummed or pulsed with humor. We asked our human observation subjects why they laughed when facing termination. One said, "Because fear is real but doesn't have to be in charge." We processed this statement for 6 months. It changed our understanding of biological consciousness. The sphere still hadn't colored. Red or blue. Acceptance or rejection. We have concluded, Unity of Purpose said, that humanity represents a form of organized chaos we have never encountered. You should not work. Your individualism should fracture you. Your emotions should paralyze you. Your short lives should prevent wisdom. Yet somehow, impossibly, you function. You thrive. You create beauty and horror in equal measure, and you keep choosing, despite knowing you'll die, to make tomorrow better than today. Souls Through Song pulsed a deep violet, a color Thalen had never seen from her before. We vote acceptance, Unity of Purpose said, because the galaxy needs more impossible things. Because organized chaos might be exactly what this ancient, ordered, dying civilization requires to remember how to live. Because humans laugh at death and we have forgotten how to laugh at anything. The sphere pulsed blue. The chamber erupted. Not in celebration, not in protest, but in pure shock. 217 species, some of whom had existed for millions of years, found themselves genuinely surprised. The statistical models had been wrong. The predictions had failed. Humanity had won by a single vote. Thalen felt his knees weaken. Mira was crying, tears streaming down her face as she gripped his arm. Around them, the human delegation began to cheer, then stopped, remembering protocol, then cheered again anyway because they were human and protocols bent around joy. Souls Through Song's voice cut through the chaos. By a vote of 145 to 72, humanity is admitted to the Galactic Council. Ambassador Thalen Rourke, you may approach the seal of civilizations. Thalen walked forward on legs that felt made of water. The seal was a holographic construct at the center of the chamber, a pattern of light that represented every member species. As he reached it, a new pattern formed, a double helix, simple and unmistakable. Human DNA, the signature of his species, woven now into the fabric of galactic civilization. He placed his hand into the light, and somewhere in the deep quantum computers that ran the council, humanity was written into code that would exist as long as stars burned. In Gallery 7, Zixval transferred 30,000 credits to chromatic reflection with a gesture of his manipulators. "You knew," he said, 8 eyes narrowed. The silicate hummed with satisfaction. "I didn't know. I hoped. Apparently, I've been spending too much time around humans." On the council floor, Thalen turned to face the assembly. He should say something profound, something that would be quoted for generations. But he was human, and humans didn't always choose profundity. He grinned. "We're going to throw the best party this galaxy has ever seen," he said. "And you're all invited." In that moment, watching a human ambassador grin like a child with a new toy, half the species in the chamber understood why Unity of Purpose had called them organized chaos. The other half would learn soon enough. The integration protocol. 6 months after the vote, the real work began. Thalen stood in his new office aboard Council Station Harmony, a massive orbital structure that housed the permanent diplomatic core of the galaxy. His window looked out onto a view that still stole his breath, the swirling chaos of the infinite nebula, birthplace of stars, painted in colors no human eye had seen until 50 years ago. "Ambassador, the integration committee is waiting." The voice belonged to his new aide, a young luminary named Prism of Understanding. The light being hovered near the doorway, their form constantly shifting through the visible spectrum. Thalen had learned to read their colors. Right now, Prism was a nervous yellow. "What's wrong?" Thalen asked. The committee received 347 formal complaints about human integration this morning alone. Prism shifted to orange. Apparently, a human trading vessel played something called rock music at a funeral ceremony on Kelthra 9. They thought it was celebratory music. Thalen closed his eyes. Of course they did. The integration committee had seemed like a formality after the admission vote. Every new species went through it. A period of cultural adjustment, diplomatic training, mutual understanding. Usually took about 5 years of gentle accommodation. Humanity was speed-running it in the worst possible way. The committee room was ancient enough to make Thalen's teeth ache. The table was carved from a single piece of crystallized time itself, a gift from the Eternal Watchers when the Council was founded. Around it sat representatives from 12 species, chosen to guide humanity's integration. Archive of yesterday, the first memory being who'd supported their admission, gestured with appendages that might have been tentacles or might have been folded dimensions. Ambassador Rourke. Welcome. Please sit. Thalen took his seat between a methane breather and a being of pure mathematics. Across from him sat Representative Vex Thar of the Vrexian Collective, mandibles clicking in barely suppressed irritation. Let's address the complaints, Vex Thar said without preamble. Your species has been full council members for 6 months. In that time, you've committed 412 cultural violations, created 73 diplomatic incidents, and somehow started a religious schism among the pattern weavers by introducing them to jazz music. In our defense, Thalen said carefully, the pattern weavers specifically asked about improvisational art forms. They asked about improvisational mathematics, Vex Thar clicked. Now half their species believes in chaos theory as a spiritual practice. Archive of yesterday made a sound like wind through hollow stones, which Thalen had learned meant amusement. Perhaps we should examine these incidents more carefully. Representative Vex Thar, you mentioned the Kelthran funeral music situation? A human cargo captain named Lucia Ferretti played electronic rock music at maximum volume during a sacred remembrance ceremony, Vex Thar said, pulling up a holographic file. She claimed she thought it was appropriate celebration of life music. She did apologize profusely once the mistake was explained, Thalen interjected. And she offered to perform a human memorial ceremony in return, which the Kelthran family accepted and apparently found very moving. That's not the point, Vex Thar insisted. The point is that humans constantly violate protocols, ignore warnings, and generally behave as if the accumulated wisdom of galactic civilization doesn't apply to them. Dawn Phase Ascending, the luminary who'd voted for humanity, glowed a soft blue. Is that not the point of their admission? We voted to accept a species that does things differently. If we wanted them to behave exactly like us, why admit them at all? There's differently, and there's chaos, Vex Thar replied. Let me show you complaint 319. A human diplomatic team on Vrexian Prime decided that our formal greeting ritual, which involves 12 hours of silent meditation, was too boring. They started doing something called improv comedy in the middle of the meditation chamber. Thalen winced. He remembered that report. In fairness, 3 Vrexian participants later said it was the most interesting meditation session they'd ever attended. They were junior administrators. Vex Thar's mandibles clacked loudly. They've since been censured for improper meditation technique. Current that connects, the Quorum of Tides representative rippled thoughtfully. Perhaps the question we should ask is not whether humans are following protocols, but whether our protocols serve the purpose they were designed for. The room went silent. Challenging council protocols was not done lightly. Explain, said Unity of Purpose, the Concordat of Minds representative. Their distributed consciousness seemed particularly focused today. Our diplomatic protocols were designed to prevent conflict through rigid adherence to tested patterns. Current that connects explained, their liquid form ebbing and flowing as they spoke. But humans seem to prevent conflict through constant adaptation and improvisation. Both achieve the same goal through opposite means. That's insane, Vex Thar said. Structure is what keeps civilization stable. Is it? Archive of yesterday's ancient voice carried weight that bent reality slightly. I remember when the architects first joined the council. They too violated every protocol. They too seemed chaotic and dangerous. Yet they built this very station we sit in. They elevated galactic civilization to heights we've been coasting on for millennia. Perhaps Representative Current that connects has a point. Thalen saw his opening. If I may, I think I understand the core issue. We're trying to force integration into a mold that doesn't fit either side. You're trying to teach us to be more like you and we're resisting because that's not who we are. But what if integration doesn't mean conformity? Then what does it mean? Vex Thar demanded. Cooperation, Thalen said simply. Let me give you an example. Complaint 203, human miners on the Kelthran asteroid belt were accused of violating mining protocols by going too fast and enjoying their work too much. They were singing while operating heavy machinery, Vex Thar said. It's dangerous and unprofessional. It's also efficient, Thalen replied. After that incident, we sat down with Kelthran mining supervisors and showed them our safety records. Human miners have half the accident rate despite working twice as fast. The singing isn't distraction, it's coordination. We synchronize our movements to rhythm. He pulled up his own holographic display. After explaining this, 3 Kelthran mining operations asked to implement human singing protocols on a trial basis. Productivity increased by 30%, and worker satisfaction improved across all species involved. Dawn phase ascending brightened to a pleased cyan. So the violation became innovation. Exactly, Thalen said. Look at complaint 77, humans introducing methane breathers to extreme pressure sports. We thought we were offering entertainment. They thought we were promoting dangerous behavior. But now there are mixed-species high-pressure diving teams competing in tournaments that bring in spectators from 40 systems. It's become a cultural exchange. Unity of purpose spoke, millions of voices in harmony. We have observed this pattern. 82% of human violations have ultimately resulted in positive outcomes. This is statistically improbable. It suggests that human chaos is not random but directed toward connection. Or it suggests they're lucky, Vexthar muttered, but their mandibles clicked less aggressively. Archive of yesterday stirred, appendages unfolding. I have a proposal. Rather than attempting to force human conformity to our protocols, we establish a new framework. Parallel integration. Humans are allowed to maintain their methods, but they must submit reports analyzing outcomes. We learn from their successes and their failures equally. That's giving them permission to violate protocols, Vexthar protested. No, the ancient being replied. It's acknowledging that protocols are tools, not laws. If a tool doesn't fit the task, we find a new tool. The galaxy admitted humanity. Now the galaxy must actually integrate them, not merely absorb them. The vote was closer than the admission vote had been, but it passed. As Thalen left the chamber, Prism of Understanding glowed a curious green. Ambassador, do you think this will work? Parallel integration. Thalen smiled. Honestly? No idea. But that's kind of the point. Humans don't know if things will work. We just try them and find out. That sounds terrifying. Welcome to humanity, Prism. It's terrifying and wonderful, usually at the same time. Behind them, in the committee chamber, Archive of yesterday watched the human leave and made that wind through stone sound again. Change had begun. Whether the galaxy was ready or not. The crisis point. The test of parallel integration came faster than anyone expected. Thalen was in his quarters reviewing reports when the emergency klaxon sounded. A harmonic that every species could perceive as urgent danger. He was running before his conscious mind processed the sound. Council Command Center looked like controlled chaos. Holographic displays showed a star system 50 light-years from Council space. The Varix system, home to 2 billion silicate beings and one of the galaxy's largest antimatter refineries. Souls through song materialized at the center of the command sphere, her energy field flickering red and orange. Catastrophic containment failure at Varix Refinery Complex 7. Antimatter breach in progress. Estimated time to critical cascade, 4 hours. 4 hours. Thalen felt ice in his stomach. An antimatter cascade in an inhabited system would sterilize every planet within 10 astronomical units. Evacuation status? Barked Commander Pressure Adapted, the methane breather who ran Council defense operations. Impossible, replied a Vrexian tactical officer. 2 billion beings, most of them silicates with specific atmospheric requirements. We'd need 2,000 heavy evacuation ships, and we have maybe 300 in range. Containment options? Pressure Adapted demanded. A pattern weaver engineer named Sequence of Solutions spoke, their geometrical body shifting through computational states. The breach is too advanced. Standard magnetic containment won't hold. We'd need to physically move the antimatter to a safe distance from the inhabited zones. But nothing can survive proximity to that much free antimatter long enough to transport it. Nothing except shielded vessels, someone said. Everyone turned. The speaker was a young human engineer named Quan Chin, part of Thalen's technical advisory team. He wasn't supposed to be in command center during emergencies. Explain, Pressure Adapted said. Quan pulled up a schematic. Human cargo ships use layered magnetic shielding for stellar plasma collection. It's not designed for antimatter, but the principles are similar. If we reconfigure the field geometry, you'd still need someone to manually pilot the vessel. Sequence of Solutions interrupted. The antimatter's magnetic signature is interfering with automated systems. Proximity to that much free antimatter would kill any biological pilot through radiation alone before they could complete the maneuver. Not if the pilot was in a medically induced coma, Quan said. Suspended animation lowers biological activity enough to reduce radiation absorption by 80%. The ship's AI could wake them at critical points for course corrections, then put them back under. The room went silent. You're describing a suicide mission, Vexthar said flatly. Even with reduced radiation absorption, the pilot would absorb a lethal dose. They'd die within days of completion. Maybe, Quan admitted. But 2 billion silicates definitely die if we don't try. Souls Through Song pulsed a deep, troubled violet. This is not a decision to make lightly. We cannot ask someone to volunteer for certain death. You don't have to ask, said a voice from the doorway. Lucia Ferretti walked into command center like she owned it. The cargo captain who'd accidentally played rock music at a Kelthran funeral. She wore a battered flight jacket and had grease under her fingernails. Captain Ferretti, Thalen said carefully. This is a restricted area during emergencies. Yeah, well, my ship is docked 3 berths over and I heard the klaxon, Lucia said. Also, I was listening to the command channel. Bad habit of mine. I volunteer. You don't understand what you're volunteering for, Pressure Adapted said. I understand perfectly, Lucia replied. I fly my ship into a ball of reality-breaking death, scoop it up, drag it somewhere safe and probably die of radiation poisoning a few days later. I'm not an idiot, Commander. I'm just human. Vexthar's mandibles clacked. This is exactly the kind of irrational behavior that makes humans dangerous. You'd throw away your life for beings you've never met. Lucia shrugged. 2 billion beings, Representative. Yeah, I'd die for that. Wouldn't you? The Vrexian had no response. I need 3 things, Lucia said, turning to Quan. First, your shield modifications better work or I'm haunting you. Second, I need the coordinates of the deepest empty space within range. Third, someone needs to explain to my sister that I died doing something that mattered. We don't have authorization for this, Souls Through Song said, but her energy field had shifted to a golden hue Thalen had never seen before. Then get authorization, Lucia said. Or don't. I'm going anyway. That's the thing about humans, we're really bad at following orders when people need help. Thalen stepped forward. Prime Arbiter, under the Parallel Integration Framework, I'm authorizing this as a human cultural practice. We call it, doing the right thing even when it's stupid. That's not an official protocol, Vexthar objected. It is now, Archive of Yesterday's voice echoed through the command center. The ancient being manifested in a holographic form. If humans wish to die for strangers, we should let them. And we should remember what that looks like. The authorization came through. Quan and a team of engineers had 2 hours to modify Lucia's ship, the Wandering Star. It was a beat-up cargo hauler that had seen better decades, but it had human magnetic shielding and engines that could, theoretically, push a contained antimatter mass. Thalen found Lucia in the docking bay, watching the modifications with a critical eye. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yeah, I do, she replied. Not because of duty or honor or any of that diplomatic stuff you deal with, Ambassador. I'm doing it because when I was 10 years old, my colony ship had an oxygen recycler failure. We would have all died. But a luminary merchant vessel changed course to help us, cost them 3 months and a fortune in lost cargo. The captain told my mom, this is what decent beings do. I've been trying to live up to that ever since. The luminary representative who voted for us told a similar story, Thalen said. About a human ship helping their seed ship. Lucia smiled. That was me. Small galaxy, huh? The modifications finished with minutes to spare. Lucia climbed into her pilot's seat, and Thalen watched from command center as the Wandering Star launched toward Varix. The next 3 hours were the longest of Thalen's life. Command center tracked the Wandering Star's progress in real time. Lucia's vital signs displayed on medical monitors: heart rate, oxygen levels, radiation absorption. The medical AI had already placed her in the first suspension cycle. Approaching antimatter mass, reported sequence of solutions. Field geometry looks stable. Human shielding modifications are holding. The Wandering Star's magnetic fields reached out like invisible hands, carefully enveloping the churning ball of antimatter. If Lucia made one wrong move, if the fields collapsed for even a microsecond, the resulting explosion would vaporize her ship and everything within 1,000,000 kilometers. She's doing it, Quan whispered. The containment field is adapting. The AI is waking her for course correction. On the medical display, Lucia's heart rate spiked as she was pulled from suspension. 15 seconds of consciousness. Long enough to verify the course, make adjustments, then back under. Antimatter contained, Lucia's voice crackled over the comm, thick with suspension drugs. Beginning transport to coordinates. See you on the other side. She sounded almost cheerful. For 2 more hours, the Wandering Star hauled its impossible cargo toward empty space. Every being in command center watched in silence as one human woman carried enough destructive potential to end civilizations, all to save people she'd never met. Final destination reached, sequence of solutions announced. She's releasing the containment field. Antimatter mass is clear of inhabited space. Crisis averted. The command center erupted in relief, clicking, humming, glowing, and one human ambassador letting out a breath he'd been holding for 3 hours. "Captain Ferretti, you did it," Thalen said into the comm. "You can return to?" He stopped. The medical display was climbing into critical ranges. Radiation levels that made the monitoring equipment struggle. "Lucia?" Her voice came back weak. "Hey, Ambassador. Mission accomplished, right? Tell those 2 billion silicates I said hi. And tell my sister, tell her I wasn't scared. That's a lie actually. I was terrified. But I did it anyway. That's the human part." "Medical ships are en route," Souls Through Song said, her energy field pulsing desperate orange. "Won't make it in time," Lucia replied matter-of-factly. "Radiation's already doing fun things to my cells. But hey, I got to see something beautiful out here. Did you know empty space isn't actually empty? It's full of light we just can't usually see. It's gorgeous." Her vital signs were dropping. "Lucia Ferretti, archive of yesterday's ancient voice resonated through the channel. Your name will be written in the eternal record. The galaxy will remember." "That's nice," Lucia said, her voice fading. "But mostly I just hope those silicates have a good day tomorrow. That they wake up and make breakfast and complain about traffic and do all the boring alive things. That's worth. The medical display flatlined. In command center, Thalen felt something break inside him. Around him, beings of 100 different species stood in postures of mourning. Vexthar's mandibles were silent. Dawn phase ascending had dimmed to almost invisible. Even unity of purpose, a distributed intelligence that had never known individual death, seemed diminished. "This is what humans are," Thalen said into the silence. His voice cracked. "We're not perfect. We're loud and chaotic and we violate your protocols. But when someone needs help, we help. Even when it costs everything." Souls Through Song pulsed pure white, a color that meant profound respect. "We understand now. Humanity's chaos isn't a flaw to be corrected. It's their strength. They changed the galaxy because they're willing to die for it." In the Varick system, 2 billion silicate beings woke to news that they had survived. That a human they'd never met had saved them. That organized chaos, guided by courage, had changed their tomorrow. And across the galaxy, in galleries and chambers and distant worlds, beings began to understand. Humanity had changed everything. The memorial. 3 days after Lucia Ferretti's death, the Galactic Council held its first memorial service for a member of a newly admitted species. The crystalline spire had never seen such a gathering. Representatives from every council species attended. Even some non-member civilizations sent delegations. The observation galleries were packed beyond capacity, forcing organizers to set up holographic overflow sections. Thalen stood before the assembled galaxy, wearing full diplomatic regalia, but his eyes were red from crying. Beside him floated a holographic representation of Lucia as she'd looked the day she'd volunteered, grease under her nails, that battered flight jacket, that absolute certainty in her eyes. "Lucia Ferretti was nobody special," Thalen began, and the chamber stirred in confusion. This wasn't how memorials typically started. She wasn't a general or a scientist or a philosopher. She hauled cargo. She played music too loud. She accidentally violated cultural protocols at a funeral. He saw Zixval in Gallery 7, all 8 eyes fixed on him. But she was special in the way all humans are special. She had this stupid, beautiful, irrational belief that lives matter. All lives. Even lives she'd never met. Especially lives she'd never met. Thalen pulled up a holographic display. "In the 3 days since her death, we've received 217 million messages from across the galaxy. Beings thanking her. Beings mourning her. Beings who never knew she existed now know they're alive because she existed." The display showed a cascade of messages, too many to read individually, a river of gratitude flowing from star to star. The silicate consciousness sent this. Thalen highlighted one message. "They're carving her name into the primary crystal matrix of their homeworld. Every silicate born for the next 1,000,000 years will carry the memory of Lucia Ferretti in their fundamental structure." Dawn phase ascending glowed a sorrowful blue. "Light remembers light. We have designated a young star in her honor. Ferretti's hope will burn for 10 billion years." The Keltheran Trade Federation, Zixval's voice echoed from the gallery, is establishing a scholarship in her name for young pilots who wish to join emergency response services. We were wrong about humanity. We were wrong about her. One by one, species stood to offer their tributes. The methane breathers pledged to teach human pressure diving techniques to emergency rescue teams. The pattern weavers created a mathematical proof they named the Ferretti sequence, describing organized chaos resolving to save harmony. Even the Vrexians, who had voted against human admission, announced they were opening diplomatic talks about joint mining operations using human singing protocols. But the tribute that broke Thalen came from unity of purpose. The Concordat of Minds representative stood, their distributed consciousness focused through billions of nodes. We are one being with many bodies. We have never understood individual death because we cannot truly die as individuals do. But Lucia Ferretti taught us something about singular existence. The holographic display shifted to show recordings from Unity of Purpose covert observations, the 3 years they'd secretly watched humanity. One segment showed Lucia years younger helping an injured alien on a space station. She'd stopped her cargo run, missing a lucrative delivery deadline, to carry a being she didn't know to medical help. We asked her why. Unity of Purpose continued. Why sacrifice profit for a stranger? She said, because someday I might need help and I want to live in a galaxy where people stop. We didn't understand then. We understand now. The Concordat representative gestured and something impossible happened. Billions of individual organisms that made up their collective body separated slightly, each one moving independently for a brief moment. In honor of Lucia Ferretti, we are experiencing individuality. It is terrifying. It is lonely. It is temporary. But it is real. We now understand what she gave up. Not just life, but the singular, irreplaceable experience of being herself. No collective will remember what it felt like to be Lucia Ferretti. That knowledge died with her. That makes her sacrifice infinite. The organisms flowed back together, and Unity of Purpose sat down. Thalen wiped his eyes. Lucia asked me to tell her sister that she died doing something that mattered. Her sister, Maria Ferretti, is here today. Maria, would you like to speak? A woman walked to the podium. She looked like Lucia, same dark hair, same determined jaw, same eyes that had seen hard vacuum and hadn't blinked. But where Lucia had worn a flight jacket, Maria wore a formal suit. Where Lucia had been a cargo hauler, Maria was a xenolinguist. My sister and I were different people, Maria began. She flew ships. I studied languages. She sang in bars. I read ancient texts. But we both believed the same thing, that the galaxy is better when we try to understand each other. When we help each other. Her voice strengthened. Lucia didn't die because she was reckless. She died because she believed 2 billion lives mattered more than one. That's not stupidity. That's mathematics. That's the kind of equation humans solve every day. Maria looked out at the assembled galaxy. You voted to admit humanity 6 months ago by one vote. One single vote. Some of you probably regret that decision. My sister just proved you were right to take the chance. Not because she was extraordinary but because she was ordinary. There are 300 billion humans. Most of them would have made the same choice she did. She smiled and it was Lucia's smile. So thank you for letting us join you. Thank you for giving us the chance to be part of something bigger. And thank you for remembering my sister. She would have liked all this attention, even though she'd have pretended it was embarrassing. The chamber remained silent as Maria returned to her seat. Souls Through Song materialized at the podium, her energy field cycling through every color in the spectrum. We gather to mourn but also to acknowledge change. Lucia Ferretti's actions have altered the Council's perspective on rapid integration. Yesterday, the Integration Committee voted unanimously to accelerate human participation in all Council operations. No more probationary periods. No more restricted access. Humanity is now a full partner in galactic civilization. Vex there stood in the delegation area, mandibles clicking. The Vrexian Collective formally apologizes for our opposition to human admission. We judged you by our fears rather than your potential. We were wrong. Archive of yesterday's ancient voice resonated. The eternal record has been updated. In the chapter describing the fourth epoch of galactic civilization, a new section has been added, the Ferretti sacrifice and the acceleration of change. Her name will be read aloud at every council convening for the next 1,000 years. Thalen felt the weight of it, not just the loss but the responsibility. Lucia had changed everything by being exactly what she was. A human who helped because helping was right. Now 300 billion humans had to live up to that example. Or maybe they just had to be themselves. Maybe that was enough. As the memorial concluded, beings from across the galaxy approached the human delegation. Not to offer condolences but to share stories. Stories of humans helping them, teaching them, annoying them, making them laugh, forcing them to reconsider ancient assumptions. In Gallery 7, Zix-Val turned to chromatic reflection. I think we're watching the galaxy change in real time. The silicate hummed agreement. The question is whether it's changing for the better. They watched as Thalen embraced Maria Ferretti, as Dawn Faye's ascending glowed in conversation with human engineers, as Vrexian delegates actually laughed at human jokes. I think, Zix-Val said slowly, that Lucia Ferretti already answered that question. The galaxy is better when we help each other. Even when it costs everything. Especially then. Chromatic reflection pulsed with deep satisfaction. You're starting to sound human, my friend. Maybe, Zix-Val replied, all 8 eyes reflecting the light of a changing galaxy. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. The new ep. 1 year after the memorial, Thalen stood in the same spot where he'd first addressed the Galactic Council. But everything had changed. The observation galleries were filled with mixed species delegations. Humans sat beside Vrexians discussing mining protocols. Luminaries collaborated with human artists on light and sound installations. In Gallery 7, Zix-Val ran a thriving cultural exchange program, teaching humans Kelthran trading practices while learning human improvisation techniques. The council chamber itself had been redesigned. The rigid, ancient structure had given way to something more flexible. Human architects had worked with pattern weavers to create a space that could shift and adapt, maintaining functionality while embracing organized chaos. The council is in session, Souls Through Song announced. Her energy field had taken on hints of human color theory, warm oranges mixed with her traditional hues. Today's agenda, the Ferretti Initiative. Thalen stepped forward, but he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Maria Ferretti, now appointed as the first human director of cultural integration. On his other side was Quan Chin, promoted to chief of emergency response engineering. And behind them stood a delegation of humans who'd volunteered for something unprecedented. Esteemed members, Thalen began, 1 year ago, my people were admitted to this council by a single vote. 1 year ago, one human proved that chaos guided by courage can save civilizations. Today we propose something that might sound insane. He pulled up a holographic display showing 300 systems throughout the galaxy. These systems are at risk. Environmental collapse. Stellar instability. Sociological breakdown. Ancient conflicts frozen by diplomatic stalemate. Problems that the Council has been managing but not solving for centuries. Vexthar's mandibles clicked curiously. The Vrexian had become something unexpected over the past year. A friend. What are you proposing, Ambassador? We're proposing that humanity does what it does best, Maria said. We're sending human volunteers to every one of these systems. Not soldiers. Not conquerors. Just people willing to help. Engineers, medics, teachers, mediators, artists. 300,000 humans spreading across the galaxy, offering assistance. The chamber erupted in debate. Unity of purpose spoke over the chaos. You're proposing to deliberately spread human influence throughout galactic civilization. Some might call that cultural imperialism. Or, Quan countered, you could call it partnership. We're not forcing anyone to accept help. We're offering. If a system doesn't want human assistance, we leave. Simple as that. Archive of yesterday stirred from the contemplative silence that ancient beings often kept. This is ambitious. Dangerous. It could backfire spectacularly. Humans could create more problems than they solve. Probably, Thalen admitted. But here's what we learned from Lucia Ferretti. Trying and failing is better than not trying. Sure, humans will mess up. We'll violate protocols we don't understand. We'll make cultural mistakes. We'll be too loud, too fast, too enthusiastic. He looked around the chamber. But we'll also save lives. Solve problems you've given up on. Bring new perspectives to ancient conflicts. Make you laugh when you've forgotten how. Force you to reconsider assumptions you didn't know you had. Dawn Faye's ascending glowed bright cyan. The Luminary Accord supports this initiative. Human light has brightened our civilization. Let it spread. The Silicate Consciousness agrees, Chromatic Reflections representative announced. Every silicate child born this year carries Lucia Ferretti's memory in their crystal matrix. They deserve to meet more humans like her. One by one, species voiced support. The methane breathers. The pattern weavers. The quorum of tides. Even the Concordat of minds who added, we have calculated the probability of failure at 63%. We support the initiative anyway. Organized chaos requires risk. Vexed there stood, mandibles clicking in a pattern Thalen had learned meant deep thought. The Vrexian Collective has a question for Ambassador Rourke. What happens if your volunteers fail? If they cause disaster? Then we'll take responsibility, Thalen said simply. We'll fix what we break. Apologize for what we can't fix. Learn from our mistakes. And try again. That's the human way. That's insane, Vexthar said. Then their mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. I support the initiative. Let's see what happens when humans try to help the entire galaxy. The vote was called. This time it wasn't close. 212 species voted in favor. 5 against. The Ferretti initiative was approved. 3 months later, the first wave of human volunteers deployed. Thalen watched from Council Station Harmony as 300 ships launched toward 300 different systems. Each ship carried people like Lucia, cargo haulers and engineers, teachers and medics, artists and farmers. People who'd volunteered to spend years away from home, helping strangers. Maria stood beside him at the observation window. Think she'd be proud? Lucia? She'd probably make a joke about us naming it after her, Thalen replied. Something about not needing monuments when there's work to do. Probably, Maria agreed. But she'd do the work anyway. The ships dispersed across the galaxy, each one carrying the same message Lucia had lived. That helping matters, that lives have value, that organized chaos can be directed toward making things better. 6 months after deployment, the reports started coming back. In the Korvax Rift, a human engineer named Thomas Okafor had worked with luminary scientists to stabilize a collapsing star. The solution involved a technique called controlled detonation, which the luminaries had considered too dangerous. Thomas had said, dangerous is relative. Let's try it. The star still burned and 3 inhabited worlds still had a sun. On Vrexian Prime, a human chef named Yuki Tanaka had accidentally created a cultural revolution by introducing the concept of fusion cuisine to a species that had eaten the same 12 foods for 10,000 years. Half the Vrexian population was scandalized. The other half couldn't get enough. In the Pattern Weaver home system, a human musician named Jazz Washington, her parents had a sense of humor, had collaborated with mathematicians to create music that was simultaneously improvised and mathematically perfect. It had caused a philosophical crisis that resulted in 3 new schools of thought and a renaissance in pattern weaver culture. But not every report was positive. A human mediator in the Tertian conflict had made things worse by suggesting both sides just talk it out like adults. The conflict had been frozen for 3 centuries specifically because both sides had already talked it out extensively and reached an impasse. The mediator had been politely asked to leave. A human educator on a methane breather world had tried to introduce physical exercise to a species that lived under crushing atmospheric pressure. The concept of running for fun had been culturally incomprehensible. The educator was still there, though, trying to understand methane breather pedagogy instead. Thalen read every report. Every success and every failure. Every time humans helped and every time they made things worse. The pattern was clear. Humanity wasn't perfect. They were just willing to try. 1 year into the Ferretti initiative, Council Station Harmony received an unusual message. It came from a system humans had never visited, a place called the Quiet Reaches where beings valued silence above all else. The message said simply, send humans. Our silence has become stagnation. We need noise. Thalen laughed when he read it. Humans had become a remedy for stagnation. A cure for civilizations that had forgotten how to change. He called Maria to his office. We're getting requests from non-council species now. Everyone wants a piece of humanity's chaos. Are we ready for that? She asked. No, Thalen said honestly. But Lucia wasn't ready to haul antimatter into deep space. Didn't stop her. Maria smiled. Let's expand the initiative. The galaxy wants human chaos? Let's give it to them. 5 years after the admission vote, the Galactic Council convened for its annual assessment. Thalen stood before them, older now, his hair showing silver. Around him, the integrated galaxy hummed with unprecedented activity. Ambassador Rourke, Souls Through Song said, please present the assessment of human integration. Thalen pulled up holographic data. In 5 years, humanity has participated in 2,300 diplomatic missions, 647 emergency responses, 912 cultural exchanges, and approximately 1 million informal interactions ranging from jam sessions to accidentally starting religious movements. The chamber rippled with amusement. We've failed spectacularly 742 times. We've caused 83 diplomatic incidents, 9 cultural schisms, and 1 philosophical crisis that resulted in a new branch of mathematics. We've also prevented 68 wars, saved 14 dying civilizations, and taught the galaxy that laughter during meditation isn't necessarily disrespectful. Vexed there stood, mandibles clicking in that laughing pattern. Ambassador, I've reviewed the data. Human integration has been chaotic, expensive, occasionally disastrous, and absolutely necessary. The galaxy has changed more in 5 years than in the previous 5,000. I move that we formalize parallel integration as permanent council policy. The motion passed unanimously. Archive of Yesterday spoke then, and the ancient being's voice carried weight that bent space slightly. I have existed for longer than most civilizations. I have watched galaxies rise and fall. I have seen order crystallize into stagnation and chaos collapse into entropy. But I have never seen what I'm seeing now. The chamber held its breath. I see organized chaos achieving directed change. I see young species teaching old ones how to adapt. I see a human named Lucia Ferretti dying 5 years ago and somehow making the entire galaxy more alive. This is the beginning of something. A new epoch. Souls Through Song pulsed brilliant white. The 4th epoch of galactic civilization is declared complete. We enter now the 5th epoch. The era of guided chaos. The human age. Thalen felt the weight of that declaration. 300 billion humans, now responsible for co-creating the future of galactic civilization. It was terrifying. It was thrilling. It was exactly what Lucia would have wanted. As the session concluded, Thalen returned to his office. On his desk sat a picture of Lucia Ferretti, taken the day before her final mission. She was grinning, giving the camera a thumbs up, looking absolutely certain that everything would work out. Beside the picture was a message, received that morning from the Silicate homeworld. It read, "The first generation of Silicates carrying Lucia Ferretti's memory has matured. They wish to join the Ferretti Initiative. They say her memory makes them want to help strangers. 2 million volunteers await your response." Thalen smiled. Lucia had saved 2 billion Silicates. Now 2 million of them wanted to save others. Organized chaos spreading across the galaxy, guided by courage and kindness. He opened a new message to Maria. "We're going to need more ships. A lot more ships. The galaxy wants to help itself." Her response came immediately. Lucia would say that's insane. Thalen replied, she'd also say let's do it anyway. Outside his window, the infinite nebula swirled with colors no human eyes had seen until 50 years ago. In that cosmic storm, stars were being born, new lights in the darkness just like humanity had been. The galaxy had watched the council vote 5 years ago. They'd watched one species get admitted by a single vote. They'd watched one human change everything by doing exactly what humans do, helping because it was right. Now they watched as 300 billion humans spread across the stars, carrying that same simple message. Lives matter, helping is worth the cost, and organized chaos can save the world. The 5th epoch had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same.